Ethan was a thief. He was not a bad man, but he stole from rich people. He only took money from people who were greedy. Some people thought he was a hero. One night, Ethan wanted to steal from Mr. Donovan, the richest man in town. Mr. Donovan had a big house and a safe full of gold. Ethan planned for many days. He knew where the safe was. It was behind a big painting in Mr. Donovan's office. At midnight, Ethan climbed the wall of the mansion. He was very quiet. He entered through a small window. The house was dark and silent. Slowly, he walked to the office. He saw the painting and smiled. "This is easy," he thought. He moved the painting and found the safe. He took out his tools to open it. But then, he heard a voice. "I knew you would come, Ethan." Ethan turned around. Mr. Donovan was standing there. He had a gun and was smiling. Ethan froze. His heart beat fast. Mr. Donovan was holding a gun. He was smiling. "You are a clever thief, Ethan," Mr. Donovan said, "but not clever enough." Ethan looked around. The door was closed. The window was far. He had no way to escape. "How did you know I was coming?" Ethan asked. Mr. Donovan laughed. "I know everything in my house. I have cameras. I saw you climb the wall." Ethan stayed calm. "What will you do now?" he asked. Mr. Donovan walked closer. "I don't need the police," he said. "I have a better idea." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Donovan put down the gun. "I want to make a deal with you," he said. "Work for me and I won't call the police." Ethan was shocked. "Work for you? Why?" "Because you are good at stealing," Mr. Donovan said. "And I need someone like you." Ethan had a choice. Say no and go to jail, or say yes and become something worse than a thief. Ethan thought for a moment. Mr. Donovan wanted him to work as a thief, but Ethan did not trust him. "Why should I work for you?" Ethan asked. Mr. Donovan smiled. "Because if you say no, I will call the police." Ethan did not like this. He wanted to be free, but he needed to escape first. "Okay," Ethan said. "I will work for you." Mr. Donovan laughed. "Good choice," he said. "Come back tomorrow night. I will tell you your first job." Ethan nodded, but he had a plan. He was not going to work for Mr. Donovan. He was going to find a way to stop him. That night, Ethan left the mansion, but he knew this was just the beginning. Ethan walked away from Mr. Donovan's mansion, his mind racing. He had agreed to work for the rich man, but he had no intention of becoming his servant. Ethan was a thief, but he had rules. He only stole from the corrupt, not for them. As he moved through the quiet streets, he thought about his next step. Mr. Donovan was dangerous. He was powerful and had many secrets. Ethan needed to find out what Mr. Donovan was planning before it was too late. A secret meeting. The next night, Ethan returned to the mansion as promised. Mr. Donovan was waiting for him in the study, sitting in a large leather chair. "You came," Mr. Donovan said with a smile. "Good. Let's talk about your first job." Ethan sat down, pretending to be interested. "What do you need me to steal?" Mr. Donovan leaned forward. "There is a man in this city. His name is Victor Crane. He has something I want, a small black box. I don't care how you get it, but bring it to me by tomorrow night." Ethan frowned. "What's inside the box?" Mr. Donovan's smile faded. "That is none of your concern. Just do as I say." Ethan nodded, but he knew this job was more than it seemed. A visit to Victor Crane. Ethan spent the day gathering information about Victor Crane. He was a businessman, just like Mr. Donovan. but people whispered that he was even more dangerous. That night, Ethan found Crane's house. It was large, with high walls and security cameras. Getting inside would not be easy. He waited in the shadows until the guards changed shifts. Then, like a shadow, he climbed over the wall and slipped into the house through an open window. Inside, the house was dark and silent. Ethan moved carefully, searching for the black box. He checked the office, the bedroom, even the library. Nothing. Then he heard footsteps. Someone was coming. Ethan hid behind a curtain as a tall man entered the room. It was Victor Crane himself. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and took out a small black box. Ethan's eyes widened. That must be it, he thought. Crane placed the box on the table and poured himself a glass of whiskey. As he turned his back, Ethan saw his chance. Moving quickly and silently, he grabbed the box and slipped out of the room. But just as he reached the window, an alarm rang through the house. "Someone is here!" a guard shouted. Ethan cursed under his breath. He had to escape. Fast. A dangerous escape. Ethan ran through the dark hallways as guards chased him. He turned a corner and saw a glass door leading to the garden. Without thinking, he smashed through it and rolled onto the grass. The guards shouted behind him, but Ethan was already climbing the wall. He jumped down onto the street and disappeared into the night. As he caught his breath, he looked at the black box in his hands. He had stolen it, but now he had a new question. What is so important about this box? Ethan had a choice. He could take the box to Mr. Donovan, or he could open it and find out the truth. What would he do next? Ethan stood under a street lamp, staring at the small black box in his hands. It was cold, smooth, and locked with a tiny silver latch. Mr. Donovan had told him not to ask questions, but Ethan couldn't ignore his instincts. If Donovan and Crane both want this so badly, it must be important, he thought. He looked around. The streets were empty. He had two choices: take the box to Donovan or open it himself. Ethan made his decision. He had to know the truth. Opening the box. Ethan returned to his hideout, a small apartment above an old bookstore. He locked the door, turned on a dim lamp, and sat at his desk. Carefully, he picked the lock on the box. Click! The lid popped open. Inside, he found a USB drive. Ethan frowned. All this trouble for a USB? He plugged it into his laptop. A single video file appeared. He clicked play. The shocking video. The screen showed Mr. Donovan and Victor Crane in a dark room, speaking in hushed voices. "We can't let anyone find out," Donovan said. "Relax," Crane replied. "We destroyed the evidence." "Not all of it," Donovan said. "That journalist, she recorded everything." Crane cursed. "Where is the recording now?" The video ended. Ethan's mind raced. A journalist recorded something important. Something these men want to hide. This USB must be the only copy left. He quickly searched for news about any missing journalists. His heart sank when he found a name. Sophie Lane, disappeared 3 months ago. Now Ethan understood. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about a crime so big Donovan and Crane were willing to kill for it. A dangerous decision. Ethan knew he was in trouble. If Donovan found out he had opened the box, he would be a dead man. But he also knew he couldn't return the USB. "I need to find Sophie Lane. If she's alive, she can expose them." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. But just as he reached for the handle, bang, bang, bang! Someone was knocking, hard. "Ethan Hale," a deep voice called. "We know you're in there. Open up or we break the door." Ethan's blood turned cold. Donovan's men had found him. Ethan's mind raced. Donovan's men were outside his door. He had no time to think. He grabbed the USB drive, shoved it into his pocket, and looked for an escape. "Bang! Bang! Last chance, Hale! Open the door!" Ethan ran to the window. His apartment was on the second floor. The alley below was dark and empty. It was his only way out. Crash! The door burst open. 3 men in black suits stormed in. Ethan didn't wait. He jumped out the window. A narrow escape. The wind rushed past him as he hit the ground. His legs ached, but he had no time for pain. The men above shouted and ran down the stairs. Ethan sprinted down the alley. "Stop him!" one of them yelled. Ethan turned a corner and saw a motorcycle parked outside a bar. The keys were still in the ignition. He didn't hesitate. He jumped on, started the engine, and sped off just as the men reached the street. Bullets flew past him. Bang, bang! "Damn, they're serious," Ethan muttered. He weaved through traffic, his heart pounding. He needed a safe place to think, and he knew exactly where to go. A hidden ally. 30 minutes later, Ethan knocked on a small door in an old part of town. A peephole slid open, and a woman's voice whispered, "Who is it?" "It's me, Ethan," he said. The door opened, and a woman with sharp eyes and dark hair let him in. Her name was Riley Monroe, an old friend and a hacker. "You look like hell," Riley said, crossing her arms. "Good to see you, too," Ethan smirked, handing her the USB. "Can you check what's on this?" Riley plugged it in and scanned the files. Her eyes widened. "Ethan, this is big," she whispered. "This video, it's proof that Donovan and Crane covered up a murder." Ethan clenched his fists. "Whose murder?" Riley typed quickly. A news article popped up on her screen. "Sophie Lane," she read. "A journalist investigating corruption. She went missing 3 months ago. Police say she drowned, but..." She pointed at the video. "This proves they killed her." Ethan felt anger rise inside him. "They got rid of her because she knew too much." Riley turned to him. "So what's the plan? Are we exposing them?" Ethan thought about it. If he released the video, Donovan and Crane would come after him harder than ever. But if he didn't, they would keep getting away with their crimes. He took a deep breath. "We're exposing them, but we need to be smart," Riley smirked. "I love a good fight." The plan. Ethan and Riley worked through the night. Riley hacked into news stations, police servers, and social media. If Donovan and Crane wanted to hide the truth, Ethan was going to make sure everyone saw it. By dawn, the plan was ready. In just a few hours, the video would go live everywhere. But before they could celebrate, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Meet me at the old train station. Alone. I have information about Sophie Lane. Unknown." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Could Sophie still be alive, or was this a trap? Riley looked at him. "Are you really going?" Ethan nodded. "I have to. If there's a chance she's alive, I need to know." As he grabbed his coat and walked out the door, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over yet. Ethan rode through the quiet streets, his mind racing. Who sent the message? Was Sophie Lane really alive, or was this a trap? The old train station had been abandoned for years. It was the perfect place for an ambush. But Ethan had no choice. He needed answers. He parked his stolen motorcycle a few blocks away and walked toward the station, staying in the shadows. The sky was dark, and the wind howled through the broken windows. Then he heard a sound. Footsteps. Ethan ducked behind a pillar. Someone was already there, a mysterious stranger. A hooded figure stood near the tracks, glancing around nervously. Ethan stepped forward, his hand near the knife in his pocket. "You sent the message?" he asked. The figure turned. It was a woman. Her face was hidden under the hood, but her voice was clear. "Ethan Hale, you're braver than I thought." Ethan frowned. "Who are you?" The woman pulled back her hood. Ethan's eyes widened. "Sophie Lane?" She was alive. The truth about Donovan and Crane. Sophie nodded. "Yes, but I don't have much time. Donovan and Crane tried to kill me, but I escaped. I've been hiding ever since." Ethan crossed his arms. "Why do they want you dead?" Sophie pulled a small notebook from her coat. "Because I have something even worse than the video on that USB. Ethan took the notebook and flipped through the pages. His stomach twisted. It wasn't just about one murder. Donovan and Crane had been running a secret operation for years, stealing government money, framing innocent people, and killing anyone who got in their way. "This is enough to destroy them," Ethan said. Sophie nodded. "But we need to be careful. They have people in the police, the government, everywhere. If they know I'm alive, they'll come for me again." Ethan thought for a moment. "Then we don't just expose them. We take them down." The plan to end it all. Ethan took Sophie back to Riley's hideout. When Riley saw Sophie, she nearly dropped her laptop. "Holy hell, you're alive," Riley said. Sophie smiled. "Barely." They spent the night planning their next move. The USB video was already set to go public, but with Sophie's notebook, they had even more evidence. "If we send this to the police, Donovan will cover it up," Ethan said. Sophie nodded. "Then we don't go to the police, we go to everyone." Riley grinned. "Leave that to me." At exactly 8 a.m., every news channel, website, and social media page in the city exploded with the truth. The video of Donovan and Crane's secret meeting, the notebook detailing their crimes, the proof that Sophie Lane was alive. By noon, the city was in chaos. The police had no choice. Donovan and Crane were arrested. Their empire fell apart. Their allies turned against them. Ethan watched it all unfold from Riley's apartment. "It's over," he whispered. Or so he thought. One last threat. That night, Ethan received a call. A deep, cold voice spoke. "You made a big mistake, Hale." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Donovan and Crane were just the beginning," the voice continued. "You don't know who you're really up against." The call ended. Ethan stood there, gripping his phone. This wasn't over. Ethan stared at his phone, his heart pounding. "You don't know who you're really up against. Who was this mysterious caller?" He turned to Riley and Sophie. "We have a problem." Riley frowned. "Bigger than Donovan and Crane?" Ethan nodded. "Someone else is behind them, someone more powerful." Sophie's face turned pale. "That makes sense. Donovan and Crane were just businessmen, but they had police, politicians, even military contacts. Someone else had to be controlling them." Ethan clenched his fists. "And now they know we exist." A deadly warning. Before they could talk more, a loud explosion shook the building. Boom! Glass shattered, and flames erupted from the lower floors. "They found us!" Riley shouted. Ethan grabbed the USB and Sophie's notebook. "We have to go, now!" Smoke filled the air as they ran down the emergency stairs. Outside, 3 black SUVs screeched to a stop. Men in suits armed with rifles jumped out. "Get in the car!" Ethan shouted. They ran to Riley's old black sedan. She floored the gas pedal, tires screeching as bullets flew past them. "Who the hell are these guys?" Sophie yelled. Ethan checked the side mirror. The men weren't normal thugs. They moved like soldiers. "They're professionals," Ethan said. "Whoever called me, this is their army. A desperate escape." Riley took sharp turns, dodging through traffic, but the SUVs kept coming. One pulled up beside them. A gunman leaned out the window, aiming at Ethan. Bang! Ethan ducked as the bullet shattered his window. He grabbed his pistol, took a deep breath, and fired back. Bang! Bang! The gunman collapsed, and the SUV swerved, crashing into a street pole. "Nice shot," Riley said, but they weren't safe yet. 2 more SUVs chased them onto a bridge. Ethan reloaded. "Riley, can this car go any faster?" Riley smirked. "Hold on!" She suddenly yanked the wheel, sending the car into a sharp drift. The SUVs tried to follow, but one lost control and skidded off the bridge, crashing into the river below. "One down," Sophie said. But the last SUV was still behind them. Ethan had 1 bullet left. He aimed carefully and fired. Bang! The bullet hit the driver's tire. The SUV spun out of control and slammed into the bridge railing. They were free. A new enemy. They pulled into an old warehouse and caught their breath. "That was close," Sophie said. Ethan checked his phone. A new message. "Unknown number. You survived. Impressive. But this is just the beginning." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're not done with us." Riley sighed. "Great. So who are we up against now?" Ethan looked at Sophie. "We need to find out who was really pulling Donovan and Crane's strings. Because this is bigger than just 2 corrupt businessmen. This is a war." The warehouse was dark and silent except for the sound of their heavy breathing. They had escaped, but for how long? Ethan read the message again. "You survived. Impressive. But this is just the beginning." Whoever was behind this had money, power, and an army of trained killers. And they weren't going to stop. Riley broke the silence. "Okay, let's list what we know. Donovan and Crane were just middlemen. Someone bigger was controlling them." Sophie nodded. "They were laundering money, bribing officials, and covering up murders. But for who?" Ethan rubbed his chin. "There must be a name, a leader, someone at the top." Sophie pulled out her notebook and flipped through the pages. "There is one name I kept seeing in my investigation before they tried to kill me. Vanguard." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Vanguard? That sounds like a code name." Ethan frowned. "Or an organization. The Hunt for Vanguard." Riley worked quickly on her laptop, hacking into government databases, news archives, and financial records. "There's nothing official on Vanguard, but wait, this is interesting." She turned her screen toward them. It showed a private security company, Vanguard International. "It's a global security firm," Riley explained. "They provide bodyguards, train soldiers, and handle special operations for rich clients." Sophie's eyes widened. "What if they're not just protecting criminals? What if they're running the whole operation?" Ethan clenched his fists. If that's true, we just declared war on one of the most powerful private armies in the world. A dangerous lead. Sophie scrolled through her notes. Before I disappeared, I was supposed to meet with someone. A whistleblower. He worked inside Vanguard. But before we could meet, he vanished. Riley searched for the name. Leon Mercer, ex-military. Vanguard hired him 5 years ago, but 3 months ago he went off the grid. Ethan nodded. If he's still alive, he might be our only chance to expose Vanguard. Sophie checked her phone. Before he disappeared, he sent me a message with one word, Horizon. Riley typed the word. Horizon. Got it. There's an old military bunker outside the city. It was used for secret projects, but it shut down years ago. If Mercer is hiding, that's a good place to start. Ethan grabbed his gear. Then we leave now. A trap in the dark. They drove for hours into the wilderness. The bunker was hidden deep in the forest, surrounded by rusted fences and overgrown grass. No guards, Riley whispered. That's weird. Ethan pulled out his gun and signaled for them to stay close. They moved through the darkness and reached the bunker door. It was slightly open. Someone was here, Sophie said. They stepped inside. The air was cold, the walls covered in dust. Flashlights flickered as they moved through the narrow hallways. Then, they heard it, a faint clicking sound. Ethan froze. A tripwire! Get down! He shouted. Boom! An explosion rocked the bunker, throwing them against the walls. Smoke filled the air. Alarms blared. And then, footsteps. They weren't alone. A deep voice echoed through the bunker. You should have walked away, Ethan Hale. Ethan coughed through the smoke, his gun ready. Who are you? A figure stepped into the dim light. A tall man in a black uniform, his face covered by a mask. My name is Shadow, the man said, and you just made your last mistake. Smoke filled the bunker, and the sound of boots echoed in the darkness. Ethan, Sophie, and Riley were trapped. The masked man, Shadow, stepped forward, his voice cold. You should have stayed out of this, Ethan Hale. Ethan gripped his gun. I don't take orders from ghosts, Shadow chuckled. Brave, but foolish. Suddenly, a red laser dot appeared on Ethan's chest. Snipers. Drop your weapons, Shadow ordered. Ethan glanced at Riley and Sophie. They were outnumbered. Slowly, they raised their hands and dropped their weapons to the ground. Shadow nodded. Smart choice. Now let's talk. The truth about Vanguard. Shadow motioned for his men to surround them. You've been digging where you shouldn't, Hale. Vanguard is more than just a security company. We control governments, economies, and people like you are nothing more than insects to us. Sophie stepped forward, her voice defiant. You kill innocent people. You tried to erase me because I knew the truth. Shadow smirked. Sophie Lane, alive and still causing problems. Impressive, but it won't matter soon. Ethan's mind raced. They needed a way out. Riley, standing close to Ethan, whispered, I have a flash grenade in my bag. If I can reach it... Before she could finish, Shadow raised a hand. Enough talking. We have orders. He turned to his men. Kill them. A fight for survival. Ethan moved first. He lunged at the nearest soldier, grabbing his gun and twisting it away. A shot fired into the ceiling. Riley dove for her bag, grabbing the flash grenade and throwing it to the ground. Bang! A blinding light filled the bunker. The soldiers staggered, momentarily blinded. Ethan grabbed Sophie's arm. Run! They sprinted through the smoke-filled hallways, bullets whizzing past them. Riley hacked a control panel, forcing a door open. "This way!" she shouted. They ran down a metal staircase into an underground tunnel. Footsteps echoed behind them. Shadow's men were still chasing them. Ethan spotted a rusted ladder leading up to a vent. "Go!" he yelled. Sophie climbed first, followed by Riley. As Ethan grabbed the ladder, a strong hand pulled him back. It was Shadow. Ethan versus Shadow. Shadow punched Ethan hard, sending him crashing into the wall. "You can't escape," Shadow growled. "Vanguard owns this world." Ethan wiped blood from his lip. Not for long. Shadow threw another punch, but Ethan dodged, slamming his elbow into Shadow's ribs. The masked man barely flinched. They fought brutally. Punches, kicks, elbows. Shadow was fast and trained, but Ethan fought like a man with nothing to lose. Then Ethan saw an opening. He grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor and swung it hard into Shadow's knee. Crack! Shadow stumbled. Ethan didn't hesitate. He climbed the ladder, escaping through the vent just as Shadow reached for him. A narrow escape. Ethan pulled himself out of the tunnel and slammed the vent shut. They were outside, in the middle of the forest. Sophie and Riley were already starting the car. "Come on!" Sophie shouted. Ethan jumped in, and Riley floored the gas. They sped away into the night. Behind them, the bunker exploded in flames. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. Shadow was still alive. Vanguard wasn't finished. And now they would be coming for him. The car sped down the dark forest road, the glow of the burning bunker fading behind them. Ethan, Sophie, and Riley had escaped. For now. Ethan clenched his fists. Shadow was still alive, and Vanguard wasn't going to stop. Sophie turned in her seat. "We need a plan, Ethan. Running won't work forever." Ethan took a deep breath. "We're not running. We're fighting back." Riley glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "How?" "Vanguard has an army. We have a hacker, a journalist, and a thief." Ethan smirked. "Then we use what we have. The next target." Sophie opened her notebook. "Leon Mercer was supposed to meet me before he disappeared. That means he knew something." Riley typed on her laptop. "If he's still alive, Vanguard is keeping him somewhere. Let's see, got it. There's an old research facility outside the city. Vanguard took control of it last year. If Mercer's alive, he's there." Ethan nodded. "Then that's where we're going." Breaking into the facility. They arrived at the facility just before dawn. High fences, security cameras, armed guards. It was a fortress. Ethan studied the layout. "Too many guards to fight our way in. We need another way." Riley grinned. "Leave that to me." She hacked into the security system, disabling the cameras and unlocking a back door. "You have 5 minutes before they notice," she warned. Ethan and Sophie slipped inside. The facility was cold and sterile, the hum of machines filling the air. Then they heard voices. Ethan peeked around a corner, a glass cell. Inside was a man, weak, bruised, but alive. "Leon Mercer." "The rescue." Sophie rushed forward. "Mercer, we're here to get you out." Mercer looked up, his eyes filled with shock. "You shouldn't be here. They'll—" Alarms blared. "Too late," Ethan muttered. Guards flooded the hallway. Ethan grabbed a fallen rifle and fired. "Riley, we need an exit." Riley's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Working on it. Head to the east wing." Ethan pulled Mercer to his feet. "Can you walk?" Mercer nodded weakly. I'll try. They ran through the hallways, dodging bullets. Riley hacked the doors, opening a path to the exit. But then, Shadow appeared. You again? Ethan growled. Shadow smirked. You don't learn, Hale. The final fight. Shadow lunged at Ethan. They crashed into a lab table, sending equipment flying. Ethan fought with everything he had, dodging Shadow's brutal punches. But Shadow was fast, too fast. Crack! Shadow's fist slammed into Ethan's ribs, knocking the air out of him. You can't win, Shadow sneered. Vanguard owns this world. Ethan gritted his teeth. Not anymore. He grabbed a metal scalpel from the table and jabbed it into Shadow's arm. Ah! Shadow roared in pain. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed Mercer and Sophie and ran. Riley, now! Boom! Explosions ripped through the facility as Riley overloaded the power grid. They sprinted to the exit, dodging falling debris. Just as they reached the door, Shadow's voice echoed behind them. This isn't over, Hale. Ethan didn't look back. Yeah, you keep saying that. They jumped into the car and Riley sped off. The war has just begun. As they drove, Mercer coughed. You just made Vanguard your enemy, Hale. Ethan smirked. They started this fight. We're going to finish it. Sophie looked at Mercer. You know their secrets, don't you? Mercer nodded. And I know how to take them down. Ethan's eyes darkened. Then let's end this. The car sped down the empty highway, the city lights flickering in the distance. Ethan, Sophie, Riley, and Mercer had escaped. But for how long? Mercer coughed, still weak from captivity. You don't know what you've gotten yourselves into, he said. Ethan glanced at him. Then start talking. Mercer sighed. Vanguard isn't just a private army. They control information, governments, entire economies. They don't just work for criminals, they create them. Sophie leaned forward. You have proof? Mercer nodded. I kept records. Names, locations, secret bank accounts, it's all on a drive. Riley's fingers tightened on the wheel. And where's that drive? Mercer exhaled. Hidden. But I can get it. A deadly pursuit. Before Mercer could say more, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Riley cursed. They found us! 3 black SUVs raced toward them. Hold on! Riley shouted, slamming the gas pedal. The car roared forward, but the SUVs kept pace. Gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered the rear window. Ethan grabbed a rifle from the back seat. Sophie, take the wheel! Sophie slid into the driver's seat as Ethan climbed through the shattered window. He aimed at the tires of the nearest SUV. Bang! Bang! The front tire exploded, sending the SUV skidding off the road. One down, Ethan muttered. But the other 2 SUVs weren't stopping. A dangerous gamble. Riley hacked into her laptop. I can disable their engines, but I need time. Ethan reloaded. You've got 30 seconds. The second SUV pulled up beside them. A gunman leaned out, aiming at Mercer. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired first. The gunman collapsed and the SUV veered off, crashing into a roadside barrier. Only one left. Riley's fingers flew over the keyboard. Almost there. Got it. The last SUV's headlights flickered, then the engine died. It swerved wildly before slamming into a tree. They were clear. Sophie exhaled. That was too close. Ethan turned to Mercer. Where's the drive? Mercer hesitated. It's in a vault, but not just any vault. It's inside a Vanguard black site. Riley's eyes widened. You're telling me the only evidence that can take down Vanguard is inside one of their own secure facilities? Mercer nodded. And breaking in is suicide. Ethan smirked. Good thing I specialize in the impossible. The night was quiet as Riley pulled the car into an abandoned warehouse. They needed a plan, and fast. Ethan turned to Mercer. "Tell me about this vault." Mercer exhaled. "It's inside a Vanguard black site, an underground facility beneath a corporate office in the city. High security, biometric locks, armed guards. If we try to go in guns blazing, we won't make it out." Sophie frowned. "Then we don't go in as enemies, we go in as ghosts." Riley smirked. "Now you're speaking my language?" Ethan nodded. "We break in, get the drive, and get out before they even know we were there." Mercer sighed. "Easier said than done." The plan. Riley pulled up blueprints of the building on her laptop. "The black site is underground, no windows, no easy exits. But there's an old maintenance tunnel that leads to a backup server room." Ethan studied the map. "That's our way in. But once inside, how do we reach the vault?" Mercer pointed to a restricted area. "The vault is secured by a biometric scanner. Only high-ranking Vanguard officials can open it." Sophie tapped her chin. "Then we need to borrow a fingerprint." Ethan smirked. "I think I know just the guy." The setup. The next night, Ethan and Sophie sat at a high-end bar, watching their target, Damian Cross, a Vanguard executive. Cross sipped an expensive whiskey, unaware he was being hunted. Sophie whispered, "How do we get his fingerprint?" Ethan grinned. "Leave that to me." He approached Cross casually and accidentally bumped into him, spilling a drink. "Damn, I'm sorry, man," Ethan said, handing Cross a napkin. Cross wiped his hand, annoyed. "Watch where you're going." Ethan nodded and walked away, holding a napkin with Cross's fingerprint. He tossed it to Riley. "Will this work?" Riley grinned. "Oh yeah, now let's break into Vanguard." Breaking into the black site. At midnight, they reached the maintenance tunnel. The entrance was locked, but Riley bypassed it in seconds. "We're in," she whispered. They moved through the tunnel in silence. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Finally, they reached the backup server room. Riley plugged in her laptop. "I can disable some security, but not for long. Move fast." Ethan and Sophie slipped into the hallways, avoiding patrols. They reached the vault. A guard stood in front, armed. Ethan moved fast. Before the guard could react, he was unconscious. Sophie placed the napkin on the biometric scanner. Access granted. The vault door slid open. Inside, a single metal case sat on a pedestal. The drive. Sophie grabbed it. "We got it!" Then, alarms blared. Intruders detected. Ethan cursed. "Riley! We need an exit now!" Riley's voice crackled in their earpiece. "Security's locking down the building. You have 60 seconds. Footsteps pounded in the halls. Ethan and Sophie sprinted toward the tunnel. But as they reached the exit, a shadow stepped into their path. Shadow. His voice was calm. "Going somewhere?" Ethan raised his gun. "Out of our way." Shadow smirked. "Not this time." Shadow stood in the doorway, blocking their escape. His men were closing in from behind. Sophie clutched the drive. They had what they came for, but getting out alive was another problem. Ethan's grip tightened on his gun. "Last chance, Shadow. Move!" Shadow chuckled. "You really think I'd let you walk out of here?" Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired. But Shadow was faster. He dodged and lunged forward, knocking the gun from Ethan's hands. They crashed into the wall, trading brutal punches. Sophie tried to run past, but Shadow grabbed her wrist. Not so fast. Ethan slammed his elbow into Shadow's ribs, forcing him to let go. Sophie, go! He shouted. She didn't hesitate. She ran toward the tunnel. The chase. Riley's voice crackled in their earpieces. Security is locking the building. You have 30 seconds before this place is sealed. Sophie sprinted through the tunnel, gripping the drive tightly. She could hear Ethan and Shadow fighting behind her. She had to make a choice. She turned back. Ethan was losing. Shadow was stronger, faster, and he wasn't holding back. Sophie saw a loose pipe on the ground. She grabbed it and swung. Crack! The pipe slammed into Shadow's head. He stumbled, giving Ethan an opening. Ethan didn't waste it. He grabbed Shadow's arm and flipped him onto the ground. Let's go! He shouted. They ran, leaving Shadow groaning behind them. The escape. As they reached the exit, guards were already outside, blocking the way. Sophie cursed. We're trapped! Riley's voice came through. Not yet! Suddenly, the power cut out. The building went dark. Riley had hacked the security grid, shutting everything down. Run! She yelled. Ethan and Sophie sprinted through the darkness. Gunfire erupted behind them, but the guards were blinded by the blackout. They burst out of the tunnel and jumped into the getaway car. Riley floored the gas. They sped away as alarms blared in the distance. They had escaped. The final move. Ethan exhaled, catching his breath. Do we have it? Sophie held up the drive. Yeah, and this is going to destroy Vanguard. Mercer nodded. With this evidence, we can expose everything. Corruption, assassinations, secret deals. Vanguard is finished. Ethan looked out the window. Not yet. Shadow's still out there, and he's coming for us. Sophie's grip tightened on the drive. Then we finish this before he finds us. The city skyline stretched ahead as Riley sped through the streets. They had the drive. They had the proof. But Vanguard wasn't going to let them expose it so easily. Mercer was already on his laptop trying to decrypt the files. Give me time, he muttered. This drive is locked with military-grade encryption. Sophie frowned. How long? Mercer sighed. Hours, maybe a day. But we don't have that long, do we? Ethan shook his head. No, Shadow will be coming. The hideout. Riley pulled into a safe house, a rundown apartment they had set up earlier. It wasn't much, but it was hidden. Ethan bolted the door. Nobody leaves. Nobody makes a call. We wait until Mercer cracks the drive, then we upload everything. Sophie turned on the news. Vanguard was already covering their tracks. Breaking news. An attack at a corporate facility has left several injured. Authorities say it was an attempted robbery, but no suspects have been identified. Ethan clenched his fists. They're spinning the story, making us look like criminals. Sophie looked at him. Then we make sure the truth gets out. The ambush hours passed. Mercer worked tirelessly, typing furiously. Almost there. Just a little more. Then, a loud thud came from outside. Riley turned to the security cameras. We've got company. The screen showed black SUVs pulling up, armed men stepping out. Shadow was leading them. Ethan grabbed his gun. They found us. We need to move, Sophie said. Mercer shouted, I just need 5 more minutes. Riley cursed. We don't have 5 minutes. Shadow's voice echoed outside. Come out, Hale, or we come in. Ethan looked at Sophie and Riley. We're not running. We end this. Tonight. The final fight. The first explosion shattered the front door. Vanguard agents stormed in, opening fire. Ethan dove behind cover, shooting back. Riley, get Mercer out of here. Sophie took out 2 guards with precise shots, but more kept coming. Ethan turned, and there he was, Shadow. Their eyes met. Shadow smirked. No more running, thief. Ethan stood, gun raised. No more games. Shadow charged. They collided in a brutal fight, fists slamming, elbows cracking. Ethan landed a punch to Shadow's jaw, but Shadow barely flinched. He grabbed Ethan by the throat, slamming him into a wall. "You think you can stop Vanguard?" Shadow growled. "You're nothing!" Ethan gasped for air, then drove a knife into Shadow's side. Shadow stumbled back, clutching his wound. Ethan wiped blood from his mouth. "Guess I'm something after all." Before Shadow could recover, Ethan grabbed a gun and fired. Bang! Shadow collapsed. The upload. Riley shouted, "We're in! Uploading the files!" Mercer hit the final key. The proof was sent. To every news station, every government agency, every whistleblower in the world. It was over. Sophie exhaled. "We did it." Ethan looked at Shadow's fallen body. Vanguard is finished. The aftermath. By morning, the world knew the truth. News stations exploded with reports of Vanguard's crimes. Governments moved in. Arrests were made. Ethan, Sophie, Riley, and Mercer watched from a rooftop as sirens filled the city. Sophie smiled. "So, what now?" Ethan smirked. "I hear there are other corrupt organizations out there." Riley grinned. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Mercer chuckled. "Looks like we just got started." The team walked into the rising sun, thieves, hackers, and fighters. But now, they were something more. They were the ones who brought justice.